What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust here from Mokashi Earthworks. Today, we're going to be talking about coconut water and coconut powder and its uses in agriculture. What I did is I put together a little couple of page report on all of the different benefits and how it works as a biostimulant, all of the nutrient properties, etc. So we'll get into that in just a minute. I think for right now, it's time to smoke one, and then we'll get right into it. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday, and I hope you all have chronic to smoke on. I hope the gardens are all doing well. We'll do Q&A as well. So if you guys have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll get to comments, all that good stuff. We extended the Microbe Plus sale. But yeah, we're going to be talking about coconut water and coconut powder in agriculture. Nothing better than a nice bong rip. What's up, OG Dundee? So what I'll do is later today, I will put this report in the Dropbox that I made. That way you guys have access to it. But essentially, it outlines all of the different biochemical composition of coconut water and coconut powder. And there's a lot of different benefits. I personally haven't used coconut water in a long time. I used to use it along with things like aloe vera and sprouted seed teas. I will start using aloe vera again in my garden space because my aloe vera plant is now large enough to the point where I can take some aloe leaves off there, blend them up, and water it into my beds. So coconut water, the clear liquid inside the young green coconuts and its powdered form are emerging as powerful biostimulants in agriculture, rich in phytohormones, nutrients, amino acids, and sugars. So coconut water plays a significant role, or can play a significant role in improving soil fertility, boosting microbial activity, and enhancing plant growth resilience. When used in organic agriculture, can offer, or even conventional agriculture, it can offer alternatives to synthetic growth regulators and can offset some nutrient inputs. That was just kind of the introduction. I'll keep reading through the report that I made. So the second part is the biochemical composition of coconut water and coconut powder. This is probably the most important part because the biochemical compounds are what's going to do the work in the soil media. And some of these things will also offer a fuel source to stimulate the soil microbiome. And anytime you stimulate that soil microbiome, those microbes produce, antimicrobial properties that can outcompete pathogens. Sometimes they produce phytohormones that stimulate plant growth. Sometimes they produce signaling molecules that stimulate and upregulate systemic acquired resistance in plants. Just depends on the compound. Coconut water contains a highly bioavailable matrix of organic and inorganic compounds. So things like phytohormones are a key compound. Things like cytokinins, like kinetin and zeatin, auxins, and gibberellins. So cytokinins and gibberellins, specifically cytokinins, stimulate cell division. Auxins stimulate root growth, and gibberellins stimulate shoot growth. So these are phytohormones. These are hormones that naturally stimulate some of these metabolic processes. They also contain sugars. So glucose, fructose, and sucrose. And these are the carbon sources that I just spoke about that will fuel microbial metabolism. So they will use these carbon compounds to grow and proliferate. This is one of the major benefits of coconut water is the amino acids. So amino acids like glutamic acid, aspartic acid, and alanine and arginine, these low weight organic compounds are able to stay soluble, and they can also grab on or chelate micronutrients, keeping them in a biologically available form. These amino acids also, all amino acids can contain a nitrogen molecule or a nitrogen atom. And they are used not just for metabolic growth, but they're used for the that assimilation of that nitrogen, which is one of the components that their DNA is made out of. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus are the 5 elements that you need to make those. And so they can use amino acids both as a fuel source and for that nitrogen, which they use in the production of different things. Let's see what else. Amino acids are also really important when we're thinking about plant metabolism, because what happens is in the soil, things, when they're liberated, they are released as ammonium, and then that is converted by a certain group of microorganisms into nitrates. Those nitrates is what the plant prefer, and they'll uptake those nitrates, and then they'll convert them back into ammonium, and then the ammonium is converted into amino acids, and then the amino acids are converted into proteins. Now, that whole process there takes a lot of energy, and I've read it could take up to 18% total of a plant's metabolic energy in the nitrogen conversion process. When the plant uptakes amino acids, because the plant can actually take up those organic source of nitrogen, and what happens is it's not spending energy to convert the ammonium into the amino acid. So it's bypassing a step in the production of that, saving energy. And so the energy that it has can be converted or used for other metabolic processes. So amino acids are very, very important. However, they have a rapid turnover in soil. So as soon as you introduce something like, let's say you use soy hydrolysate or you use coconut water for an amino acid source, or fish hydrolysate for an amino acid source, the bacteria is utilizing that as quickly as the plant is. So there is competition because it is a carbon source for metabolic fuel and a nitrogen source. So amino acids are really, really great. And I have other videos specifically on amino acids where I get into detail about what they do, how they work, how they function, and what the plant can do with them. Coconut water also contains potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sodium, which are your base cations, phosphorus, iron, zinc, copper, and manganese. So it has a very large profile of nutrients. It doesn't contain all of the nutrients, but has almost all of the nutrients. Even though they are in smaller quantities, you have to remember that the coconut itself is just a giant seed. So all of that fluid is the water of life that's going to start that engine that is going to fuel. It's basically the fertilizer and the fuel that's going to start that thing and make it so that way it gets enough roots into the soil that it can support itself. It's going to support that shoot growth and that biomass production in the very beginning stages of its life. It also contains vitamins, B complex and C vitamins, which are antioxidants and defense compounds. And they're also aid in microbial support because the microbes can also utilize those vitamins. Contains organic acids like malic acid, citric acid, and lauric acid. So these organic acids are also responsible for nutrient chelation. So what they can do is they can grab onto nutrient ions. A good example of this is iron, and I use this example all the time. Iron will oxidize. We've all seen oxidized iron. It expresses itself as rust. It's needed in a reduced form before it oxidizes, which is its ferric form. And it's a divalent cation. So it has two positive charges associated with it. When it oxidizes, it goes from Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus. Now, with these organic acids, they can grab on to that ferric iron, that Fe2, it's in its divalent form, and hold it in that form and keep it from oxidizing. So what happens is you get better nutrient availability, and the plant can access those nutrients more efficiently because they are less prone to oxidation. So all of those also regulate pH, and some of them can be antimicrobial because they are very strong acids. So that could be beneficial or that could have a negative impact depending on the quantity and what you're targeting. Coconut water also contains enzymes. So dehydrogenases. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It sounds like I'm saying it right. Peroxases and catalases. So these support soil respiration and oxidative stress mitigation. When we're talking about oxidative stress mitigation, that same analogy that we just talked about, iron, could be applied. So mitigating the amount of oxygen or free oxygen, ROS, reactive oxygen species, in a solution will help to keep those nutrients that need to be in their reduced form, like iron, zinc, manganese, in a reduced form and an available form. It also contains electrolytes. So electrolytes are going to be the calcium ions, the sodium ions, and the calcium carbonate ions. So these can help with osmotic regulation of the plant, and they also help with help and strengthen root membranes. Okay, and last of the bioactive chemicals are the phenolic compounds. So it also contains flavonoids and tannins. And so when we think of a flavonoid, we can think of like anthocyanin. Anthocyanin is a flavonoid that's produced, let's say, in really high light intense situations. I've seen plants produce higher amounts of anthocyanin because they're using it to try to protect the plant from oxidation, because what's happening is you could be getting too much in the process that are all sped up because there's so much energy coming into the plant, and it has to be able to reduce that amount of energy. And so they'll produce compounds like that. Specifically, I'm not sure the exact flavonoids and tannins, but they can also act as anti-pathogenic, and they also have some allelopathic potential. So overall, coconut water has a lot of benefits. You have to remember it is just a giant seed filled with beneficial fluid. So the effects on the soil. So those are the beneficial compounds, and these are kind of like what's going to happen as far as soil dynamics, physical structure. So improve water retention from better structure through sugar and mucilage compounds that are enhanced from microbial metabolism by the sugars and the amino acids that are in the water. So they're producing those amino acids and those sugars, and what's going to happen is the microbes that feed on those, will produce biofilms that aggregate soil together, and that can help with better air and water penetration. So all of those polysaccharide compounds that microbes produce basically help influence the physical properties of soil. They also influence the chemical and nutrient dynamic of that soil system. So they enhance nutrient bioavailability through those organic acids, which chelate things like we talked about: calcium, iron, zinc. They also can help increase the cationic exchange capacity by stimulating humic substance formation and microbial processing of coconut-derived carbon. So whenever you're cycling organic nutrients or you're bringing in organic carbon, the microbes are basically accessing that carbon. They need that to proliferate. And they're producing a lot of metabolites. And when they're breaking down, when those metabolites are breaking down organic substrates, you get the humic substance, things like the humic and fulvic acids, and those can actually, they have a bunch of benefits. I've done videos specifically on that. There's a ton that you could get into on that. 4 is the effect on soil microbiology. So the sugars and the amino acids, like I talked about before, act as high energy substrates that promote microbial biomass and enzyme activity. Basically all of the secondary metabolites that these microbes are producing are what's responsible for doing the biochemical work on the soil system. So a good example is if a microorganism is producing, let's say, phosphatase, which is a phosphorus solubilizing enzyme. So when it's producing this protein or this enzyme, this enzyme acts like a key, and it's basically unlocking the bonds between whatever compound is attached to that phosphorus, and it's liberating that phosphorus in an ionic form that the plant can observe. So in this case, it would be phosphate. It's liberating phosphate, so that way either the organism or the plant can access that phosphorus, depending on the microbial root and plant association that we're talking about. Vitamins and stuff, again, they stimulate beneficial bacteria, especially nitrogen fixers and phosphate solubilizing bacteria, like I just. They also have biocontrol activity. So lauric acid and phenolic compounds exhibit antifungal and antibacterial effects, suppressing pathogens like Rhizoctona, Fusarium, and Pythium without harming beneficial microbes. So they can target specific types of, pathogens. And, for me, with the food crops that I grow, tomatoes, cucumbers, potatoes, onions, and some herbs, beans too. Usually things that I have to look out for is leaf spot septora, especially on any cannabis or tomatoes. I have to deal with things like powdery mildew on cucumbers, any types of melons, squash, especially when the temperature starts to cool. So implementing some of these products, coconut water could be one of these, like I'm talking about here, can have benefits where it kind of suppresses a lot of those things, and you can get further into the season or go through the whole entire season without having any issues. Again, a lot of it is preventative as opposed to post-infection. I'm actually doing a video on Instagram with Leaf Septoria, and I'm doing a control versus an inoculated, and then a post-infection treatment. All right, effects on plant system. So growth, promotion, and development. So talked a little bit about cytokinins, notably kinetin and zeatin, stimulate cell division and expansion, root proliferation, and delayed senescence. So anti-aging effects on leaves. So this may not be something that you would want to introduce late into flowering, because delayed senescence, you want that natural senescence, especially with cannabis. And you want to kind of go through those fall colors. Auxins, which encourage root developments, gibberellins, which contribute to stem elongation, seed germination, and flowering. It also has an impact directly on nutrient uptake. So coconut water enhances root exudation and activity of plasma membrane HAT pases, which are an enzyme, improving ion uptake, especially potassium, nitrate, and phosphate. We talked a little bit about amino acids already. Abiotic stress tolerance from coconut water. So electrolytes like sugar, and the sugars help maintain osmotic balance during drought and salinity. The antioxidants from the vitamins and flavonoids reduce reactive oxygen species, which I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Oxygen basically works on a lot of different things, and it wants to bond with it to kind of reduce and get it to its lowest state charge that it can. And so the higher the electric state, essentially, the more energy it'll have and the more reactivity it'll have. And then it also helps with some biochemical signaling pathways. So there's the cytokinin signaling, we have auxin signaling, we have reaction oxygen species, detoxification, the osmotic stress response, and phenylpropanoid pathways. So for cytokinin, it's delayed senescence, enhanced chloroplast biogenesis, and shoot growth. Auxin signaling will be root elongation, gravitropism, and apical dominance, which, maybe you want apical dominance. I prefer plants that show auxiliary dominance and kind of branch out really nice. Reactive oxygen species detoxification is another really important one to mention, because that is really, really important when we're talking about any of these chemical processes. Another really good example is when you have nitrogen fixing bacteria, they usually create nodules on plants. Like if you look at legumes, and the reason why they do that is because they need to protect themselves from oxidation, because the protein, the enzyme that they produce, nitrogenase, it's very susceptible to oxidation. And without that, it basically doesn't have the energy to cleave the dinitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into a biologically usable form. And so reducing reactive oxygen species has a net benefit on a wide variety of not just nutrient dynamics, but cellular dynamics too, because reactive oxygen species that are in cells will actually rip things apart. And so that cell can't function properly unless it has the ability to mitigate reactive oxygen species. So osmotic stress response with the upregulation of aquaporins and osmolyte biosynthesis. And so when you have these, they basically protect internal water and create, better conditions for the plant under stress and drought conditions. And there's different ways that you can apply coconut water. I personally think that fresh right out of the coconut is going to have the most benefits, because most of the bioactive compounds are still going to be intact, versus if you were to process it down to like a coconut powder, you're going to lose some of the efficiency. You might increase the overall percentage, but it's because you're extracting a lot of the water out of there and drying it out. And when you do that, you oxidize a lot of the material that we talked about, and things change. And so it is my opinion, this is just through my experience, that fresh coconut water is the best. So if you try to get something off the shelf that's like coconut water that's been like pasteurized or treated, it's going to lose some of those bioactive compounds depending on how processed it was. Same thing with the drying process. I'm not saying that those don't have benefits, like the minerals and the vitamins and stuff like that, even the sugars that will still have benefits. But I think that overall net benefit is just fresh coconut right out of the coconut. So I'll open the chat up for Q&A. I just wanted to get through the little thing that I wrote. I will put this on the Dropbox, and I'll put a link on my stories, and I'll drop a link in here where you guys can read through that. Do I have anything that works on tomato blight? So this is a question from yes. So the trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis will both work on tomato blight. However, I just did a sale and you guys wiped me out. So it'll be about another week before I'm back in stock. Do you personally use the fulvic and humic all the way till chop, or no? So no, I don't. I usually, because most of the time I am growing in a modified growing mix. So like a peat base with compost and amendments and like, living soil, quote unquote. And I reuse that soil all the time, and it already has a lot of nutrients in it. And I've already done, several runs out of it where I'm applying humic and fulvic acids and microbes. So it's a very bioactive soil that has a lot of nutrient solubility. So the way that I'm using it is more like an additive. Like I'll use the N-humate once in veg, and then when I'm transitioning, I'll hit it once with the K-humate, and then maybe a week 3 or 4, I'll hit it with a little bit of K-humate. Depending on the flowering time, I usually stop feeding around week 6, because I'm usually harvesting at between 55 and 60 days on most of the stuff that I grow and I breed with. But if you're in a different scenario where you might be running an inert media where you're running cocoa, you might be running the product more frequency at a lower dose rate and continuing that up until, maybe the last week or the last few days. So it just depends on the situation. The humate fertilizers are very flexible, and you can kind of, build your recipe depending on what, system you're using. All right, here's another question from the chat. If your coconut powder bricks up on you, other than trying to chip away at it in a glass jar, LOL, is there any way to save it? I mean, maybe some warm water, but again, I think that fresh is best. Fresh is best. I haven't had a lot of experience with it hardening up, but I assume that if it's just dehydrated, that you could probably just rehydrate it. Yep. Hawaii is a great place. If you're in Hawaii, you know that it's great to have that coconut water. It's really accessible, and so it's definitely a good choice for a biostimulant if you're wanting to add a biostimulant to your regimen. I think coconut, especially in tropical areas where there's abundance of it. So, yeah, it's a great way. Says I've had wicked PM on a squash plant right next to my girl, and she didn't get a speck. Are there different variances of PM for different plants? Yes, there are. There are different types of powdery mildew for different types of plants. If you really want to get in depth, I recommend checking out Sank Angel. I think his channel is called Zenthanol, ZENTHNAL, Zenthanol Consulting. I'm not sure if I got that right or not, but he talks a lot about that. And you can treat a wide variety of different types of plant fungal pathogens, bacterial pathogens with the trichoderma and bacillus combination. Will you start carrying the coconut powder? No, I know that people like this type of information, so I wanted to create some engaging content for you guys so you guys could learn a little bit about it as a biostimulant. I've used it in the past. I think it's great. But no, I'm not going to start selling it. Biscuits and Gravy says he's a big fan of adding silica, especially for the outdoor season. Yeah, I like to use the calcium silica, which is 44% calcium, 51% silica. It's got a little bit of iron, a little bit of magnesium in it. It's great for balancing pH if you're in an acidic pH or an acidic soil. So far, look, I'm going to be doing an update for the Battle of the Breeders podcast, which is on this same channel tomorrow. It's not going to be a live. I'm actually going to film tomorrow, and it'll just outline what's going on and an update because we're about maybe 2 more weeks away from opening our doors at the new grow and dispensary, our little vertically integrated spot. So we're only a couple of weeks away until we start popping seeds. We've did some breeder interviews already. You guys can go back and watch those if you haven't already seen them. Yeah, like I said, I think that that regardless of how you or what type of product, whether it's fresh or whether it's freeze dried, you're going to have added benefit. You're definitely going to have added benefit. Do you dilute the coconut water? With fresh, I'd probably dilute it maybe like a 1-to-1, but it's got so much good stuff, and it's not like a fertilizer either, right? So it's you might want to make sure that the pH isn't too acidic or really alkaline. Maybe if you want to, I don't think it's going to hurt either way though. I mean, it doesn't have like a massive amount of nitrogen or a massive amount of phosphorus. It's got small amounts because that's what you know so if I was going to dilute it fresh, I'd probably just do 1-to-1. But I'm sure you'd still get benefits at like you know small amounts, maybe like 30 milliliters a gallon. Typically, that's the good ratio for anything. But if I was like hitting some like outdoor soil, man, if I had just like a ton of it, like a big old tote, I'd probably mix it with just one, like 50-50, and I hit all my vegetables and trees, and I just get everything. Greg says 1 to 500. I'd go like, I would just fucking go for it. But that's how I am. I like to test things to the limit. Is there anything that can be added to a bokashi tea at the beginning or end to boost the tea? Probably maybe a little bit of micro plus, but you probably are brewing those same kind of consortium if you're making a tea from like bokashi. If you're talking about the inoculated substrate, I would think that no, I mean just make sure you don't go too long. Usually you don't want to go past like 30 hours to be on the safe side. But I think you have to be a little bit more specific other than bokashi because bokashi is actually a word that means anaerobic fermentation. It's a Japanese word. And when we're talking about bokashi composting, we're talking about anaerobic composting. If we're talking about bokashi microorganisms, we're basically talking about a consortium of, probiotic and photosynthetic microorganisms. Microbe Plus has a strong smell. Yes, Microbe Plus does have a strong smell. Here, I have some right here. I'll smell it for you. So it kind of smells like stale beer. So it's like fermented, like that fermented smell, and maybe like a little bit of funkiness. So it's got kind of it's kind of sweet and funky. It's like that sweet fermenty. Oh yeah, look at that. One last pollen of Black Lime Reserve. All right. Yeah, not too bad. It doesn't taste great though. It's not bad for you, but it doesn't taste great. Somebody asked me that one time, and I tasted it, and I was like, no, it doesn't taste great. Tastes like what it smells like old stale beer, but but it's got this kind of like sweet smell in it too. He's asking if Biscuits and Gravy's asking if the calcium can be top dressed or watered in. You could do both. The thing is, I like to use it as a top dress. I'll also water it in, but when I water it in, I make sure that I have something mixing the water because even though this is a really, really fine powder, it is basically like a solution grade powder. It's not soluble like a salt is. If you put, let's say, Epsom salt, right, into water, it's going to completely disassociate, right? It's like it's going to completely dissolve. This is a lot heavier. And so if you're not mixing it, you'll have some stuff kind of sink to the bottom. But as long as you're mixing your solution, you can water it in. And that way you're getting basically an even distribution across the soil media and throughout that media as the water pulls it down through the media. But I also top dress. At the beginning of every run, I always add usually a little bit of nitrogen source, a little bit of magnesium, sometimes some potassium, and then I always put in calcium. So I like that calcium silica. Coffee makes a really good compost substrate. That's what we make our compost out of. All right. Well, that was my presentation on the scientific report kind of thing. I just kind of snapped everything together and read to you guys. I'll drop you guys a link to it so that way you can have access to that. And I'll see you guys later.